It's a tough thing to do if you're in a parish to decide you're going to disestablish or join with another. How did you deal with all the issues that there must have been around that, particularly for the parishioners?
I would say that the most important thing for everyone was to have a sense of hope and vision for the future. People will do extraordinary things if they believe that it will be for the better in the future. So one of the things that I hope you understand is that we had a vision for the future together. There was some hope. There was some passion for ministry. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that people needed to begin to realize that the church was the people and not the building. I remember one meeting at one of the churches that in fact did leave the building and merged with another congregation. There was a woman there who had been part of the parish for years. She had seen people buried out of that church. She had seen people married out of that church in her family. It was a very precious place for her. And at one point she said, "Oh, I think that the church really is the people, and it's not the building. It's the big C church, not the little C church." So when people realized that maintenance was a burden and mission was going to be something interesting to move towards, then people could begin to think about letting go. It's not easy. I mean, there's a grief process that's involved. We had to be very caring with one another during the whole process. There was an interesting moment when one of the congregations that went to another congregation, the wardens, after they'd been in the congregation for over 2 months, got up to thank the host congregation for making them all feel so welcome. And he said, "You know, not once has anyone said to one of our people, 'You're sitting in my pew.'" You know, and that's so important, is that the people who were welcoming the other people in really understood how difficult it was probably going to be and made space, as it were, for them to come in.
It's quite striking that much of the decision-making comes, and hard decision-making, comes from the people who are sitting in the pews, as opposed to being directed by a bishop that this will close.
There needs to be open communication. Everybody needs to know everything that's going on. And reasonable people committed to the Anglican Church and its mission, I have seen make reasonable and courageous decisions.
Quite often what we hear is, well, we don't let God work in us. We don't deal with the spiritual issues around it. How did you deal with, how did the Spirit work through you people?
There were many times during the process when we felt there were breakthroughs of the Spirit, as it were, guiding the process or guiding the individuals. And for us, particularly at the big event where we all came together, we suddenly realized that we were all together and we had been in the desert together. We had been really at our wits' end, in despair, wandering, lost, feeling very, very depressed. And suddenly, out of that event, it's like the Spirit moved and people caught a vision of the Promised Land. And we had a direction that we weren't there. We knew we weren't there. And we had to keep walking. But now we were walking together with some purpose to a future. So it was really that kind of wilderness spiritual experience of being, something had to die. We had, the old ways of doing things had to die so that something new could emerge.
So a real Easter moment.
It was, yeah. We came increasingly to identify with that whole Lenten journey. Let your church be the wheat which bears its fruit in dying. That became almost a mantra for us and was used at the closing services of the churches that did decide to close and then either move or amalgamate together. And so there was a whole spiritual resurrection. In fact, the new church is called, the amalgamated church is called the Church of the Resurrection. The bishop chose the name, but we consider ourselves to be resurrection people. Talk to those people today. They say, yes, we're the resurrection people. And there's a whole new vitality, which has increased the membership of the church. The church has doubled in size in the last 6 years because there's an excitement and a spirit there. And the other churches are also doing much better. And so, yes, there's a spiritual component to all this, absolutely.
Rick, I want to thank you so much for sharing what has happened in the Niagara Diocese. It gives us a lot of hope. We have a lot of similar situations. So thank you
Oh, you're
so
welcome.
much for being here.
It's great to be able to tell the story.
Good.